Joining me now, he is the executive director of the Reese's Senior Bowl, runs the whole show, was an NFL scout for 18 years, including 6 Super Bowl winning teams. It is Jim Nagy. Jim, what's going on? How are you?
Ari, good to jump on with you, man. Glad we connected. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, for sure. And I appreciate you taking the time to do this. I know you've been working very hard. We're getting very close to the Senior Bowl. Of course, as the saying goes, the draft starts in Mobile. Before I even get into the weeds of the Senior Bowl and the roster, could we just go behind the curtain for a second and just understand the process of getting all these players to commit to coming to Mobile and what the process is like for you during these months as you try to figure out who's in and who's out? Because I know it's like an 8, 9, 10-month process for you and your team. So how does that all go?
Yeah, it does, Ari. So, we'll get through this year's game and we'll give the guys a couple weeks off to recharge the batteries. They'll need that. Our game week's kind of a 3-ring circus. You'll see it this year firsthand. And we'll get cranking in February. We'll start watching tape. We really kind of start with every FBS starter or returning player that plays significant snaps. And then we'll go with the lower level guys. We'll start with all conference teams, and that's kind of how we start that list. And then, a lot of it through the spring and the summer is just relying on my relationships that I had in the NFL for all those years. Guys just calling, hey, giving us a heads up. I mean, you look at the last couple of years with Quinn Miners from Wisconsin Whitewater and Ben Barge from St. John's in Minnesota. Like there's no way for us to dig up a Division III player without friends in the league. So, and then we'll work that through the spring and the summer. We'll wrap up tape probably the beginning of August. Really start going up to some schools during 2 days in August practice. And then we'll be at games every Saturday. We'll download the tape from the NFL Dub Center, just like the teams do. And we'll work it right through the beginning of November when we start that invite process. So, and through that time, a lot of it is just engagement with players on social media. It's been a nice tool for us to connect with the players. 4 years ago when we started this thing, that was the biggest thing. I heard a lot from agents where, the guys would get their invite and they really didn't know what to do with it. They would ask the agent, well, should I go to the Senior Bowl? Should I not? I just think we've created enough buzz and anticipation and excitement around the game now that the buy-in from the players is significantly different than it was 4 years ago. I'll say that for sure. And I think that's impacted the entire all-star landscape. I mean, I think, the Shrine game and the NFLPA game, those are great games. I think those guys are benefiting just from the whole all-star process being lifted up a little bit.
Yeah, I remember when you took over, and I remember there was just like that, a bit of a shift really with the whole entire game. And I've heard from agents as well, just, the entire Senior Bowl has really changed in a big way. I remember when you really joined Twitter as well, but you mentioned all these relationships that you have. And I was kind of wondering because these last couple of months, or really just last month, there's been a lot of college coaching shenanigans that happen, a lot of madness, and you're in contact with all these colleges and all these universities, and everything just flips upside down with Notre Dame, Oklahoma, USC, etc. How is that all for you? Does that affect you in a big way?
It didn't affect us much. No, it really hasn't, because when it all started, our guys had basically mostly accepted their invites already. There were a couple ones where we had sent the invite and then the coach jumped, and we always send the invites to the head coach. So right. I had to follow up with guys in the school. Like, did coach give him his invite, or is it just sitting in some office somewhere there? That's really it. No, it's really been a fascinating past month just to see all the movement. And again, we do try to track that stuff just because those relationships are so important. But no, it didn't really have a lot of impact on what we're doing here so far.
Gotcha. So the Senior Bowl roster is once again shaping up to be an incredible roster, and everyone really wants to talk about the quarterbacks, and I'm among them. And it feels like you have most of the top guys set to be there. And I saw you put out an interesting tweet on Sunday, and I want to mention in here, NFL teams and media who got it wrong on Justin Herbert and Josh Allen should learn from those mistakes when evaluating Liberty's Malik Willis. Quarterback is a dependent position, and too many people ignore the supporting cast. Willis wasn't playing with a single NFL player this year. Now, Malik Willis will be there at the Senior Bowl in Mobile. What should we expect from him, and where do you foresee him going in April once we get there? Because I remember earlier this year, he was a really hot name. It kind of cooled off a little bit. Where is he at right now?
Yeah, I think this entire class, Ari, is starting a little lower than last year's class. I think the Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Mac Jones crowd. Maybe Mac more towards the later of the first round, but I think that those other four guys were probably lock top 15 guys going into the spring process. Whereas I think this year's group is more like mid one to mid two. And I think, the guys we have coming here so far, Kenny Pickett from Pitt, Malik Willis, obviously Liberty, you brought him up, Carson Strong from Nevada, Desmond Ridder from Cincinnati. I think those guys will be in that mix. I think Matt Corral will be in that mix. I think Sam Howell will be in that mix. I think we'll have those six guys. And then the exciting thing is, for our game and for draft fans is there's so much yet to be determined. I think all this needs to, the kind of the stacking needs to really shake itself out. So we've had, Justin Herbert a couple of years ago was a big one for us. And in the, previous to me, like Baker Mayfield and Carson Wentz and some of these guys have had number one overall picks. But this year is going to be unique in the sense that there is no order. You talk to NFL teams right now and you throw those six names at them. I mean, you can talk to 10 teams. And there's going to be a different order. So that should be fun. In regards to Malik, I kind of hesitated putting that out there because I never like to speak negatively about players. And I wasn't trying to do that with the other Liberty players at all. Those guys are good college football players. But I think really, especially in Justin Herbert's case, I think people overlook that he wasn't playing with a lot of NFL skill people. And he was having to do a lot on his own. I went and saw Malik and Liberty play up at UAB this year. And he's running around. He's trying to make a lot happen on his own. And I think when quarterbacks do that, they're prone to mistakes. They're prone to some bad decisions. So if you just look at the stat sheet and you see, Malik throwing 3 interceptions in one game and 2 in another, I mean, he might not have the gaudy stats that some of those other guys do. I just think we need to rein it back in and be like, okay, this is a dependent position. He's not playing with a lot of guys around him. So I know that, even talking to the Liberty staff when they were down in Mobile last week, they're excited to see Malik down here with other NFL players around him and see what that's going to look like. So again, I think Malik's he's got everything. He's very strong. I think that's probably the most overlooked thing. We talk about arm strength, athleticism, speed, just pure speed. But he's incredibly strong. So I think there was a play in that UAB game where there was 9 defenders had a shot to get him on the ground and no one could. It's one of the coolest plays I've seen live in a long, long time. So yeah, I think that's the exciting part of this process is they're the uncertainty of it.
Yeah, one of the things you mentioned there, and it's so true, like you could talk to like any team right now in the NFL and you really will get a different answer about all these quarterbacks. And we know that all it takes is one team to fall in love with one of these guys and he's going to end up going really high. And, that could definitely happen with Malik because I know a few teams who have told me that they really, really like what they've seen out of him so far. They're at Liberty with the supporting cast that he has. Another quarterback that you already mentioned there is Kenny Pickett. Of course, the Heisman finalist, was just tremendous this past year at Pitt. What have you seen from him? And is it like a safe bet to say that he's the QB1 in this class? And really just how high could he go here come April? Because, again, like I said, these guys are all over the map when it comes in the NFL, but it feels like the consensus is that he is the top guy in this class. Is that safe to say?
Probably. I mean, if you try to come up with some sort of consensus, probably is. But again, it's not a slam dunk. It's not a clear-cut situation like it was with Trevor Lawrence and Joe Burrow the previous year. But no, Kenny's rise has been awesome to watch. Again, we invited Kenny to the Senior Bowl last year. And I had some really good conversations with him about, his decision to stay in school or come out last year. And it was really a tough one because last year at this time, Kenny was probably a 4th round pick for most teams, 4th or 5th. He certainly wasn't a solid day 2 pick. So for him to come back and have the year he had is awesome. I know that, you go back to last year's tape, he was playing beat up. He was playing through some injuries. So when you watch this year, just the mobility was vastly improved. He was getting outside the pocket. He was making more happen with his legs. Whereas I think a year ago, a lot of people questioned the mobility aspect. He looked like he had a little more zip on his ball this year. The arm strength looked improved. Just a better all-around player, and he was cutting down on some of the bad decisions. I think he had a better supporting cast this year. I think he was forcing the issue a little bit too much last year. So you saw the 13 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. And I don't know what it ended up being this year, but it was like 40 something touchdowns and, single digit interceptions. So I love seeing those guys come back. I mean, it is very similar to, Joe Burrow and Mac Jones going into their last years were probably 3rd, 4th round picks too. So to see Kenny have a similar trajectory has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, like it was just a crazy year for him, and like it's just amazing because every year you really don't know. Like we always like project who's going to be the top guy in the draft when the college season starts, but you never know who's really going to explode. Like we've seen the Zach Wilsons, the Joe Burrows, and now here we have Pickett this year, who just completely took over and was a Heisman finalist there at Pitt. I want to shift over to the running backs for a second because this position has become so fascinating because, especially at Mobile, we've seen a bunch of guys who go to the Senior Bowl and have immediate success in the NFL. How is that class shaping up this year? Because, there are guys who could have high grades but end up going in the later rounds. And like even last year, like Elijah Mitchell and Khalil Herbert were fantastic there. And, this year they've shined, but they're going in later rounds. How is that, how is that group coming together here this year for the Senior Bowl?
Yeah, all right, that's a great question. I know you bring up Elijah and Khalil. I mean, those guys went in the 6th round, which is crazy to think in hindsight now. And they were such accomplished college players. They had great weeks here. They tested well. They really checked all the boxes. So I think that's indicative of where we're at in the, just the devaluing of the position right now, which is unfortunate for those guys. Nobody takes more of a pounding than they do. But really like this year's class. And I think you can just start in the college football playoff. We got James Cook at Georgia coming down. I think, when we're done with this process, he won't be known as Dalvin's old brother anymore. I think James will make a name for himself. But he's splitting a lot of carries there at Georgia. So he doesn't have the gaudy numbers, but he's a guy that averaged over 6 yards a carry every year of his career at Georgia. They split him out wide. They can play him in the slot. He's really versatile. Hassan Haskins at Michigan. Anytime you set an all-time rushing record at Michigan, that's a big deal. They've run the football pretty well there over the years. So you've seen Aiden Hutchinson kind of put the defense on his back. Hassan's kind of put the offense on his back once Blake Corum went down. So we're excited about Hassan down here. And then at Alabama, Brian Robinson. He waited his turn. A lot of guys aren't waiting their turn right now. He waited his turn behind Najee Harris. Is really a 3-down player. He's proven that. They're a significantly different football team when he's on the field and when he's not. So the fact that he went out in the SEC title game, I think what's not being talked about enough, we're all looking at what Bryce Young did, and we should. It was a great performance by Bryce. But if B-Rob doesn't come off his injury and kind of gut his way to get back in, some of that pass protection stuff would have been a lot more leaky without Brian. I mean, Bryce probably would have been getting hit a lot more. So for them to shut out that Georgia defense, in terms of sacks, a lot of that, when you go back and watch the tape, was on Brian Robinson. And then I'll throw in one other name. It's Damien Pierce at Florida. He's kind of a personal favorite of our office. He's a guy that, again, I think 80-some carries this year. So again, you look at the stat line, it's not going to impress you. But when you watch the tape, he's an NFL runner. Like there's no better way to say it. He's thick, he's powerful, he runs angry, he can catch the football out of the backfield. So to me, he's going to be a steal for a team that gets a low mileage back that really runs like an NFL guy runs. So with those 4 guys, and we've got a few more that we really like, but I think if we're going to start at the running back spot, those are 4 good names.
Yeah, but you mentioned all these guys, and again, we're going into a direction right now in the NFL where these guys are going later than what their talent really is, and it's a bit annoying, but that's really where the position has gotten to. But we mentioned Herbert and we mentioned Mitchell, like especially Mitchell, like what he's doing in San Francisco in Kyle Shanahan's system, he's been just phenomenal. And that's a team that even drafted a running back in the 3rd round this past year, and Mitchell has overtaken him. So it just shows how great these guys could be, even though they're going much later than we would expect them to. You've been obviously studying all these guys for months and months, you and your team. Who are some other guys that you expect to see pop during that week at Mobile who will get the fans' attention as we, get closer to April's draft? Give me a few more names, some other position groups as well.
Yeah, I would say, Trey McBride at tight end. I think that for a lot of the draft geeks like us, we know Trey McBride, out of Colorado State, won the Mackey Award. So it's not like he's a hidden name. But I don't know if a lot of people stay up late night on the, especially east of the Mississippi here, and watch Mountain West football. But no, Trey's a really fun guy to watch. Great athlete, even going back to high school. He's one of those 3-sport guys. He was his school's all-time leading scorer in basketball. He was like his school's all-time leading home runs guy in baseball. On defense, he had it was like 7 interceptions, a bunch of 40 sacks, something crazy. So Trey's just a great athlete. So I think he's going to have a big week down here. I think a lot of people are going to see why there's some first-round buzz around Trey McBride. I think he's going to justify that down here. Trevor Penning from Northern Iowa is a guy that's and this is a really good tackle class, Ari. Last year we had a really good interior class. Yeah. This year the tackle group is strong. But Trevor's a guy, The only hesitation right now in the NFL is we haven't seen him do it against real NFL guys yet. I think you could make a case that the best player he's went up against is Ellerson Smith in practice the previous 3 years, who's now playing for the Giants, was down here for the Senior Bowl last year. So if he comes down here and does what I think Trevor will do, I mean, right now I think for most teams he's probably in the 20s, early 30s range. But he's truly a guy. If he comes down here and takes care of this edge group, which is a really good class, I think that's probably might be arguably our best position group overall. I mean, you could see Trevor Penning skyrocket. I wouldn't put it out of the realm of possibility of him getting in the top 10, top 5. When we went up to Northern Iowa and gave Trevor his invite, I actually brought up the Eric Fisher example from when Eric Fisher came down here from Central Michigan and was really a late 1, early 2. Had a great week. That was the class with Lane Johnson and Luke Jokel. And Eric went number 1 overall. I'm not going to say Trevor's going to be the number 1 overall pick, but I think he can make a similar climb like that. And then defensively, there's a bunch of guys I want to see. Like Jalen Petrie from Baylor is just a really fun player to watch on tape. He's kind of a secondary chess piece. You can move him around. Just super disruptive guy. Really urgent. So I think there's. We could go on and on, Harry, but those are a couple names that I know I'm excited to see what they do down here.
You mentioned McBride. Is it just me, but it feels like the tight end group this year is much deeper than usual when it comes to the Senior Bowl. Is that a fair assessment? I mean, it just feels like there are way more guys who could be going, in the upper echelon in those first 3 rounds even.
Yeah, it's you nailed it. No, it absolutely is true. And I only have 3 years to really go back and reference this against, but so most years we bring 6, sometimes a 7th, because we'll use one of those tight ends as a fullback, like Josiah DeGuara from the Packers a couple years ago went the 3rd. Trayvon Wesco went to the Jets. I mean, those guys are fullbacks now in the league, and we use them as fullbacks here. This year we're at 8 tight ends right now, and I think we could probably go to 12 or 14 and be. I mean, our goal is to get all our players drafted. I think there's, there could be, a dozen to 15 tight ends drafted this year. It's a really strong group. So, and again, there's a lot of different types of guys. You got guys that can put their hand in the dirt, like Jeremy Ruckert at Ohio State, and then you've got guys like Cole Turner at Nevada who are just really mismatched guys in the pass game, just big targets. So I think everyone wants those guys. I think the feedback from the NFL has been, I'd rather see more tight ends in your game than wideouts, because there's so many wideouts. We really want to find that that tight end that can be a mismatch for us. So yeah, it's a really strong group for us. And then I said the edge class, you might be right. It might be the tight end class.
Interesting. So, when you get to see all these guys finally come down to Mobile, everyone comes in, all the hard work is finally paying off. Everyone is there finally, right? Do you feel like you have a good sense of where these guys are going to end up going once it's April? Because the difference between the Senior Bowl and the Combine is that these guys are actually in pad. These guys are actually, running around full uniform. It's not like shorts and everything. Do you feel like you have a good sense of where they're going to end up going, at least a good area of where they're going to end up going once you end up seeing them at the Senior Bowl?
Yeah, we do. That's a good question. If I pan to the right now or on our screen, our boards over there, and like we feel good about where our grades are. I said, got to give a lot of credit to our scouting staff this year. We had 120 years of NFL scouting experience on our staff, and a bunch of Super Bowl rings on that staff. And they've done an awesome job. They've done an incredible job. We feel good about our grades. We had multiple cross checks on just about every draftable player, but then guys come down here and surprise you. Like Robert Hainsey last year is a great example. Quinn Miners. I mean, those guys, Robert Hainsey was a stud at Notre Dame. He was a 2-time captain, as a right tackle, played a little guard. But he projected as like a 6th or 7th round pick for most teams, and then comes down here and snaps a football between his legs for the first time in a competitive environment. And he goes in the 3rd round at Tampa. He looked like a better player at center than he ever looked at tackle or guard. So there's some surprises during the week for sure. But I'd say once they leave here, within a round, one way or the other, if they leave Mobile and we feel really good that they're probably a 3rd round pick, they might go late 2. They might go, middle of 4, but there's a lot more narrow range once they leave here.
Yeah, so we still haven't heard exactly who will be the coaching staffs in this game. I mean, from my understanding, it just goes by the reverse order of the records right now with what the NFL ends up picking. But the Dolphins and Panthers had it last year. What would you say is like the biggest advantage for those teams who have all those players around them for that week? Because like I remember at San Francisco, I believe it was in 2019, they had the game. And they came away from that game looking at Deebo Samuel, and they targeted him in the second round. They got him, and look at him now. He's become just one of the better offensive players in the NFL. What would you say are some of the advantages for a team that will end up coaching this game?
Yeah, all right. There's a bunch, and you're right. The NFL, the NFL league office assigns our coaching staffs. They start with the draft order. I think the only caveat is those guys need to have a full staff in place to come down here and coach it. So like Jacksonville might be out of the running now. I'm not sure how that coaching search goes, but no, there's a ton of great takeaways. That same year that the Niners are down here, I think the Raiders ended up with, between draft picks and free agents on their 53, was 8 guys out of the Senior Bowl. So there's certainly great takeaways. I think the main ones are in the position meeting rooms. I think if the other 30 teams come down here and really pay close attention down on the field, they'll see which guys are taking coaching and which ones aren't. Which ones, and if a guy has a bad rep in a one-on-one drill and a coach pulls him aside and tries to hone something, they can see who applies that stuff. But it's more in the meeting room. It's who shows up on time or who shows up early, who's taking notes, who asks good questions. Who might take more time, to pick the playbook up. So it's a lot of that stuff. And then probably I would say in the meal rooms, at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, just seeing how these guys interact with each other. I think there's a lot of great takeaways that way. And I'll say this, Ari, there's something we haven't really put out there. I didn't know if it was like newsworthy or not, but we're going to bring in 4 HBCU coaches this year and pair them with each club. Because there's been a little blowback from teams that don't coach in the game. That why don't we, the teams that coach have such an advantage. My pushback to them is, yeah, these teams have earned it, right?
Right.
They've earned the right to coach in this game. And I do believe the Senior Bowl coaching staffs is just one of those really smart mechanisms for parity that the league has put in place. This used to be the game that the conference championship losers coached. So, when they flipped it and made it the draft order, that made a lot of sense, right? I mean, that's why we all love the NFL. We all think our teams have a chance every year, right? So we appreciate the league sending our coaches down, but we wanted to do this. Now there'll be 2 coaches on each side that leave Mobile with all the inside access. So one, it'll help the other 30 teams make a phone call and find out some of that information maybe they wouldn't have in past years. And then 2, it helps these coaches. It helps these HBCU coaches to maybe make a connection with a GM or a head coach or someone. And, if they have goals of maybe getting to the NFL someday, we're making that connection. So, I'm sorry, it's a little long-winded answer, but that's kind of all-encompassing view at our coaching staff.
No, there's a lot of information there. And I've said this before, and I've spoken to people on the Dolphins staff who were there last year, and they're like, no, there is an advantage of just being there and being around these guys for a full week. I mean, it does go a long way, and you get to know these guys more than really. I mean, like every team obviously does a lot of research leading up to the draft, but actually being there at the Senior Bowl and being around all these guys, it definitely goes a long way. And there's some news there you just mentioned with the HBCU thing. I mean, it is a big deal, and I think I haven't seen that at all anywhere. So it's definitely newsworthy there, Jim. You did mention 2 things there that I want to get to at the end, but before I get there, I want to ask you one thing about yourself, because I mentioned at the top that you, before becoming the senior director of this game, you had you have a lot of experience with teams, right? 18 years as a scout, 6 Super Bowl winning teams, Packers, Patriots, and Seahawks among those teams. I feel like the average fan just isn't fully aware of the away time and just the work that the scout has to go through over the course of a year. Could you just give a bit of a view of the lifestyle that you have to go through as a scout year in, year out, just so they understand exactly what you guys do?
No, Ari, I appreciate that question because I don't think a lot of people are aware of it. And this was me taking this job was strictly a family decision.
Yeah.
I've got 2 kids at the time. They're 13 and 16 now. They're in 7th grade and a junior in high school now. I think at the time, whatever that was 4 years ago, they're 4th grade and in 8th grade. And I was missing everything. It really is. It's not, it's a job everyone loves to do. So no one's complaining about it. But quality of life is not great as a scout. You're on the road, 175, 200 nights a year. And it's really difficult. You don't sleep a lot. I mean, you're up till midnight, 1 o'clock typing reports. You're up at 6 and getting to a school. Again, if you didn't love it, you wouldn't do it. So nobody's complaining. But it really is taxing on a family. I think you need a really, really strong mom at home. I credit my wife. She really pulled our family through for all those years. And this was just lucky. We were living in Mobile, Alabama. This job came open. not that I was looking for anything else, but this job allows me to do what I love to do. That's evaluate players. Also allows me to grow my skill set. I mean, this isn't, when you're on the road scouting, you're watching players and typing reports and going from school to school. You don't even get to do anything like this. So,
right.
this has really helped broaden me in my skill set. And it's been a lot of fun, but it was a family decision. So those guys, so much respect for all those guys, and those guys that, the guys that sit in the GM chair. That's why we were so steadfast in having a Senior Bowl last year, during COVID, and thank God now we're very grateful we pulled that off safely. But I couldn't imagine getting to April last year as a GM and making these multi-million-dollar decisions and never having seen these players in person or sat across from them for an interview. So no, I really I respect the life of a scout and the jobs these GMs have. But yeah, it's again, I don't think any guy would trade it, but you certainly have to love it. It's not for everyone. I've seen the scouting lifestyle really rip through guys in the past. I think when I got into it, the key, what everyone said was, if you can make it 5 years, then you're in. If you can make it 5 years and prove that you know what you're looking at from a team's perspective, they'll keep you on board. If not, they'll let go of you. In 5 years, you'll know whether you have the just the dedication and the organizational skills. There's so much into it because you're out on the road by yourself. 5 years is really kind of the key number there.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I really asked that question is because, we don't really get scouts to come on podcasts. We really don't get to see what they do. And like the average fan, of course, knows the GM, knows the head coach, knows the offensive coordinator, but there are so many more people who are doing a lot of the behind the scenes work that we really don't get to see them. I think there are some teams who are now starting to, video all of this. Like the Colts have a really good behind the scenes thing, which is just tremendous. We get to see all these people and see their work throughout the year. But the amount of work and the amount of away time that they have from their family and the wife and kids and everybody, it's a lot. And I feel like a lot of people really don't get to see that. So I appreciate you just going inside a little bit there. Two more things before we wrap this up. You mentioned before how the draft order is based on who gets the coaching staff. We all, there's a lot of, we have to give hope to these teams. A lot of these teams, a lot of the behind the scenes people who are doing the work. I want you just to give hope to one team, a fan base right now, who might not be doing so well this season, but you believe in the people they have in that building, and you believe they're going to turn around here very soon.
Ooh, you put me on the spot.
Yeah. We got to give hope to some people here.
There's probably a lot of them. And I'll just bring it back to last year's game. I think the Carolina Panthers, again, I'm close to a lot of guys in that organization. So I believe in I am close to them, but I do believe that Matt Rule's the right guy. And I'm just like you, we're on Twitter probably more than we should be. I know I am. But Matt's getting beat up a little bit right now for what's going on in Carolina. But I think if they get that quarterback situation figured out, they've got some great young pieces on that defense. They have cornerstone pieces on defense with Derek Brown, really at every level. Derek Brown, Brian Burns, Jeremy Chin, now JC Horn. I mean, that defense is built to win. They really just need to find the quarterback. Unfortunately, Christian McCaffrey can't stay healthy. But that team's close. I mean, I've seen what Matt Rule's done at Temple. I've seen what he's done at Baylor. He's not one of the, I think there's some fans out there that think he's just a good college coach. I'm not a believer in that. I think Matt's just a good football coach. He'll get it done. I think they just need to figure out what's going on under center.
Yeah, I mean, I think that team they have so many building blocks there ready to go. And as you mentioned, they just keep on taking swings at the quarterback position and it keeps on failing. But once they're able to find the quarterback, their roster is pretty much set. It kind of reminds me of what Denver has right now as well, where they have all these building blocks on the roster, but the quarterback is not 100%, the guy right now. Once they're able to find it, they're going to be in a really good position there. So definitely an interesting team to watch as we move forward to the offseason. Last thing before we wrap this up, you mentioned the Jaguars before. I just want to ask, why do you think Urban Meyer did not work in Jacksonville? Why was it a failure so fast? And then I guess, who do you think would be a logical head coach there to go and help a guy like Trevor Lawrence, who we all, crowned as the next big thing, and he really hasn't had such a good year? Who do you think would be the right guy there to replace Urban Meyer?
I'll say this, Ari. I've went through a season like they did. I was part of a 2-14 team in Kansas City one year, and it was just one of those things that spiraled out of control. We were coming off a 7-9 year. where a lot of things went wrong in the 7 and 9 year. Matt Castle got hurt fairly early in the season. You know, there was just a lot that went wrong. So we really felt good going into that next year, Matt coming back. And then we started slow and just could never get traction. And I just remember going back to that year, reading a lot of what was going on. There was a lot of people speculating on what was happening in the building. So I don't want to do that. I just know whatever, it clearly didn't seem like it was working from the outside looking in. I don't know about the particulars of it. But there just seemed to be a lot there, right? Even since Urban's been let go, some of the players' comments, even Trevor Lawrence, there just seemed to be a sense of relief. And whenever you hear that coming from players, something was going on. So I don't know exactly why it didn't work, but it clearly wasn't working. I think a name that's been thrown around that I would believe in is Jim Caldwell. I think Jim Caldwell, getting him with Trevor Lawrence would be a really good relationship. If you look at what Coach Caldwell did in Detroit, had great success. And I grew up a Lions fan, so I'm kind of close to that organization. I was a diehard Lions guy growing up. And they haven't had a lot of success. You know, they won one playoff game since 1957. And I think he made the playoffs a couple of years. And, if he can get somewhere with a strong front office, it'll be interesting to see what the Jaguars do on that front. But I think Jim Caldwell is a guy that certainly should be in consideration for that job.
Yeah, I mean, Jacksonville's situation this offseason will be interesting to see what they do. I mean, it's a team that obviously a really bad year, but they have draft capital. They're going to have a top 3 pick most likely. They have cap space. They have Trevor Lawrence. I mean, they have pieces on that team, James Robinson, and all these other guys. So it's a very intriguing team, and Shad Khan will have a very big decision to make here this offseason as he tries to get this team back on track. Hey, Jim, I really want to thank you very much for the time today. We look forward to seeing you at Mobile. And just congratulations on all the great work that you're doing for football and at the Senior Bowl. It's been amazing to watch over these last several years, and just continued success.
All right. Thanks so much, man. Can't wait to get you down here and so we can finally meet in person. But thanks for having me on, and happy holidays.